Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Glad to got reviews and general musical meanderings. Looking at another preview post for 2023. This is part of my Tier 1 listening, so getting some familiarity with these albums is going to help me set the standards for what I'm listening to for the rest of the year. So let's go ahead and get started. First one I got up is Xenia Rubinos, Una Rosa. Xenia Rubinos is an artist that is born of Cuban and a Puerto Rican immigrant family, but she's born in America. But she calls very strongly on her Latin American heritage in the creation of this album. The best way I could describe Xenia Rubinos on this album is to call her a Latin American Imogen Heap. I mean that in the best possible way. I have not heard an album in quite a while, I think, that really has this level of overall creativity and expressiveness.
Ask me where I'm going, don't ask me where I'm from. I speak in 3 languages, you barely speak in 1. Kids you put in cages look like they could be my sons. You forget we were here when the West was one. Been gone for a while, so you thought I was done. Been through hell and back, and I've only just begun. Dress me, undress me, I'm so spicy, you don't like me. Don't you put me in red.
This is a lot of references musically to Latin American and particularly, I think, Cuban culture. But at the same time, it has lots of kind of progressive rock moments in it. There's some spots in here that sound straight like out of Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. And there's also some spots in here that have these flute solos that are very reminiscent of like mid-period Genesis. Her music is incredibly creative and her voice is devastatingly expressive. Probably the album right now at the top for this year is this one. So please check this one out if you get the opportunity. Okay, next up I got Sault, Earth. This is the second of 5 albums that Sault released at the end of last year under password production, but free if you knew the password. And after the last couple of albums, end of last year, and the first one I was into the sort of air side of this project, which is largely orchestral. This is kind of back to sort of the roots for Sault to a degree, because it's a little bit more of like the experimental R&B that they've been doing so far.
In my way, but I can see pure now, so clear, standing in the valley of the ocean. So let the rain from the sky wash away all the pain in my life.
But like a lot of other Sault's particular albums, this has sort of a binding principle behind it. And in this one, it feels like there's a lot of emphasis on gospel vocal styles and some religious overtones. But at the same time, like this kind of diasporic percussion, meaning that there's Latin percussion, there's African percussion, but it all sort of undergirds this gospel funk feel. Okay, next up I got Accordo De Contraris, or maybe just You Are. Accordo De Contrari is an Italian progressive rock group that's been around for decades, but I've only kind of been into them for the past maybe 5 or 6 years. And what you have here is very, very aggressive instrumental progressive rock. And especially if you talk about Italian progressive rock, you know that it's going to be highly florid and melodramatic in its own way, even though this is an instrumentalist. It's very, I would say, over the top in some cases. In fact, it feels almost like an assault in some ways as a listener if you're not really ready for it. I talk about polyrhythms in music and rhythmic complexity. Accordo De Contrari has a lot of really complicated rhythms, but I wouldn't call it polyrhythmic. It's just more linear idea of rhythmic complexity with odd numbers and disorienting meters and dropping 16th notes and that sort of rhythmic depth. Accordo De Contraris is actually really good at is just when you think that the album's aggressive, over-the-top, disorienting nature gets to be too much, they'll change it up. And one of the things that they do very, very well in this album and on previous albums that I've heard from them is put 1 or 2 tracks in that really contrasts a lot of their other work. In this case, you have some, like a guest vocalist comes in for one of the tracks, and that helps to break it up. So even though this is an album that can be very overwhelming, there is attention paid to that, and it keeps it from spilling over into feeling a little bit too self-indulgent. And finally for this post, Fleetwood Mac's Tusk. I've been kind of picking a little bit recently at Fleetwood Mac's back catalog, especially brought back to my attention because Lindsey Buckingham's solo album was released last year. And Tusk is one that I've never really checked out all the way through, and it's kind of a divisive album in some ways. Tusk was a follow-up to Rumors, which was, one of the best-selling albums of its time. And a classic Fleetwood Mac album. And this album was intentionally meant to be a bit of a break from the success of that album. Lindsey Buckingham really wanted to kind of have an album that was a reaction to post-punk, and started experimenting a little bit more so actually than they had in the past. Now that experimentalism doesn't really raise its head in a very profound way. We're not talking about Italian progressive rock here. It's more like a variety in song form and non-standard approaches to songwriting, or the things that he was thinking about making on this album that were going to be reactionary to what was on Rumors. And of course, the other thing about Fleetwood Mac that's interesting is that there's 2 or 3 really distinctive songwriters in the band. Now, I gravitate towards Lindsey Buckingham's work, and I kind of always have. But the tracks that are on here from Stevie Nicks, especially Sarah, is an amazing track. And the Christine McVie tracks are also just incredible. Songwriting across the board is amazing on Tusk. I don't think it'd be unfair to call Tusk Fleetwood Mac's White Album. It has big ambitions, it spreads its net very wide, and like the White Album, when it hits, it's magical. But also there's some points on here that are a little bit less than convincing, although they're still great songs, there's still amazing songwriting. When you have such high watermarks, like you had in the songwriting in Fleetwood Mac, a bump down is a little bit noticeable. One other topic I've kind of been wanting to talk about for a while, I'm going to just kind of tack it on to this one, is this idea of how I listen to music, especially new music. Being an older person and having resistance to a lot of the music that I find that's new. I mean, what are some of the methods that I use to help me get into music that I'm not familiar with? And one of them is what I call framing. Now, for those of you that are listening to me talk about this, you'll often hear me compare music I listen to things that I've heard before. Rush, you'll hear me talk about a lot. You hear me talk a lot about King Crimson. You hear me talk a lot about Jellyfish, bands like that. And those kind of nexus bands that really have a huge impact on me, I tend to use those as a way of listening to new music. So it sounds like I'm really comparing music, but really what I'm trying to do is find a way in. So very often, if for example, I was listening to Karate at the end of last year, and one of the things I find appealing about Karate is whenever they're playing in a power trio format, and their musical instrumental side takes over. Now they don't do it like Rush, but Rush has that in their music. So one of the things I find appealing about Karate, even though they sound nothing like Rush, is that the experience and the connection that I have with Rush's music allows me to hear Karate in that way. And of course, once I have that hook in that music, I can listen to that music on its own terms, and it starts to have its own meaning in terms of its own identity. So if you're a person that has a hard time getting into new music, I don't think there's really any harm in comparing the music you listen to some of your favorite music, because it often gives you a way to process the stuff around the things that are different. But that's all I have for this post. So if you like it, please like and subscribe and share the video out with your friends. Also follow me over on Spotify. I'm putting tracks up from all this stuff, getting a nice big master list for 2023 radio. I've also got a Patreon page started. I'm thinking about ways in which people can contribute and ways that I can contribute to your enjoyment of the channel. And if you're interested in finding out more about that, please go over there and check it out. Until see you next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Princeton, on the night of October 20th.